The first time Mason Kell told the whole company what he thought of me, he did it standing under a giant screen that still had my name in the corner. It was mid-February in Seattle, Washington, the rainy season dragging on like a bad mood. Vireo Stack Systems occupied 2 floors of a glass building in South Lake Union, the kind of place with kombucha taps and a culture wall full of buzzwords. I was the client implementation coordinator, which meant I lived inside other people's deadlines. Onboarding schedules, data migrations, go-live calendars. Everything that went wrong became my responsibility to absorb. I was also a single mother. My son Amir was 6 and had type 1 diabetes, the kind that doesn't care if you're exhausted or if your boss is in a mood. His continuous glucose monitor supplies ran $289.40 a month after insurance. Insulin was another $78 with copays, plus the endocrinologist visits. My rent in Greenwood was $2,050, and the only reason the math worked was because Vireo Stack's health plan made my son's care survivable. Mason knew all of that. He knew because I'd asked to leave early twice in January when Amir's school nurse called about dangerously low readings. I'd made up the time at night, laptop open at my kitchen table while my kid slept with a sensor taped to his arm. That morning, Mason called an alignment meeting. Everyone in implementation and sales jammed into the open lounge. HR was there too, Lydia Frey, clipboard in hand like she was taking attendance at a trial. Mason stood in front of the screen with the casual confidence of a man who'd never had to worry about rent. The screen showed a single line in red, $312,000. Cascade Harbor Credit Union, Mason announced, letting the number sit in the room. We missed the go-live date. Contract penalty. Revenue pushed. One miss cost us $312,000. A couple of people shifted like they'd been physically nudged. My stomach tightened because I already knew where this was going. I'd been warning for weeks that we were short on engineering support and that the client's data format was different than our assumptions. Mason's eyes found me like a hook. "Jenna Watanabe," he said. "Stand up." The rain tapped the windows. The room went quiet in that way that makes you feel like your heartbeat is the loudest thing on earth. I stood slowly, keeping my face calm, because if you look emotional in a room like that, they don't see a person. They see a problem. Mason smiled, almost friendly. "Tell everyone why you decided to blow a $2.4 million account because you couldn't manage a calendar." A few nervous laughs. Not agreement, just survival. My voice came out steady. "We didn't have the resources for the required integration. I escalated the staffing gap on January 9th and again on January 23rd. Engineering assigned 1 developer for a 4-stream migration. The client added a compliance requirement mid-cycle. I requested a change order." Mason lifted a hand, cutting me off like a bad connection. "I don't want the novel. I want the headline. The headline is, 'We needed more support,'" I said, still calm. "I asked for it. I put it in writing." Mason's smile thinned. "There it is. Always in writing. Always covering yourself." Lydia from HR didn't look up, not even when Mason's tone sharpened. He leaned forward, voice bright enough to carry across the lounge. "Here's what I'm not doing, Jenna. I'm not paying overtime because you like playing hero at night." My fingers went cold. "I logged overtime because I worked overtime." Mason shrugged like it was a cute misunderstanding. "You're salaried. You're exempt. You don't get overtime." I knew that was wrong. My job didn't meet the exemption tests. I wasn't a manager. I didn't exercise independent business discretion the way the law requires. I coordinated. I tracked. I chased people. I did the unglamorous work that made Mason's promises look real. "I'm not exempt," I said quietly. "And my offer letter doesn't list me as exempt." Mason's eyes gleamed with irritation, like he enjoyed having a reason to punish me. "Listen to her. She read something on the internet." "I'm asking to be classified correctly," I replied. Mason's smile widened into something mean. "You know what I think? I think you're padding hours because you're drowning financially." The room held its breath. Then he delivered the line like he'd rehearsed it, aimed straight at my life outside the office. "If you can't afford your kid's medical drama without stealing time from my company, you definitely can't afford a lawyer to cry about it." The words landed and stuck. A couple of people stared at the floor. Someone looked at me with pity and then looked away, like pity was the only safe emotion. My cheeks burned, but my voice stayed level. I'm not stealing time. I'm recording hours worked, and I have the emails showing after-hours directives. Mason's face barely moved. Good. Save them. Frame them. Because starting today, your hours are capped at 40, no exceptions, and you're off Cascade Harbor. A demotion disguised as resource adjustment. He turned back to the screen as if I'd already been erased. Next topic. When the meeting broke, Lydia from HR caught me by the shoulder near the snack wall. Her voice was low, practiced. Jenna, don't escalate this. Mason's under pressure. He just accused me of wage theft in front of everyone, I said. Lydia's eyes flicked past me toward Mason's office. He was making a point. The point was humiliating me. Lydia's smile had no warmth. Take it as feedback. That was the moment I understood HR's job at Stack. Not to stop harm, but to make it tidy. Over the next 3 weeks, Mason tightened the screws. My workload didn't drop when he pulled me off the big client. It just got messier. He assigned me 3 smaller implementations at once, then scheduled status calls at 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. so he could later write me up for missed availability when I couldn't make both. My time cards started coming back edited. At first I thought it was a glitch. I'd submit 46.5 hours. The system would show 40.0 the next morning. A little comment would appear. Adjusted to policy. I emailed payroll. Payroll told me to talk to HR. I emailed HR. Lydia replied with 1 sentence. Mason approved the adjustments per leadership directive. Leadership directive. Like a law of physics. Then the bonus problem surfaced. Our annual performance bonuses were tied to implementation milestones. Mine, based on the metrics for the year before, was supposed to be $9,600. I had already mapped it out in my head. Credit card balance, Amir's next round of supplies, maybe finally replacing the tires that had been slipping in the rain. On March 14th, I checked the internal compensation portal. My bonus line read, $0. I stared at it until my eyes hurt, then walked straight to Lydia's office. Because sometimes you do the official thing even when you know it won't help, just so later nobody can say you didn't try. Lydia didn't invite me to sit. The bonus is discretionary, she said immediately, like she'd been waiting. It's not discretionary in the policy, I replied. It's tied to completed milestones. Lydia's expression stayed flat. Mason determined your contribution did not meet expectations. You mean because he blames me for Cascade Harbor? Lydia blinked slowly. Because he has concerns about your reliability. I almost laughed at the word, because reliability was what I'd given them at the cost of sleep and family time and my own nervous system. My time cards are being edited, I said. I want an audit trail. Lydia's gaze sharpened, warning. Be careful, Jenna. Accusations can be career-limiting. I'm asking for a record, I said. That's not an accusation. Lydia leaned back, voice softening in that false way. You're a single mom. You need stability. Don't do something you'll regret. There it was again. The same pressure Mason had used, just packaged as concern. Your kid needs insulin. Your rent needs a paycheck. So be quiet. 2 days later, Mason called me into his office. His door was open, of course. He liked witnesses. On his desk sat a printed copy of my time card. Red pen marks circled the overtime entries like crimes. Mason didn't bother with small talk. You're creating risk for me. I'm recording hours worked, I said. Mason's smile was thin. You're creating a paper trail. That's how payroll works. He stood, walked around the desk, and stopped close enough that I could smell coffee on his breath. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign a corrected classification acknowledgement. You're exempt. You don't track overtime. And you're going to stop emailing people about it. My heartbeat stayed steady, but my palms dampened. That's not accurate. Mason's eyes narrowed. You're not in a position to debate labor law. I'm in a position to tell you my job duties don't qualify, I said. And the time card edits are wage theft. His face hardened instantly. Then he went for the most vulnerable place, the way he always did. You know what you are, Jenna? His voice lowered, cruelly intimate. A broke mom with a sick kid and just enough arrogance to get herself fired. The words made my stomach drop, not because they were insightful, but because they were a promise. He pointed at the document on his desk. Sign it. I didn't raise my voice. No. Mason's smile returned, bright and cold. Then you'll be off the team by the end of the week. And when you try to sue, you'll realize what I told you in the lounge was true. You can't afford it. I looked at the red pen circles. I looked at the open door. I looked at the hallway where people pretended not to listen. And I did the only thing I could do without breaking. I nodded once, calmly, and walked out. That night, after Amir fell asleep with his stuffed owl tucked under his chin and his glucose monitor finally leveled out, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled up everything I'd kept without telling anyone. Not secrets, not stolen company files. The things an employee is legally allowed to have. My offer letter, my pay stubs, my job description, my performance reviews, my own emails, screenshots of the timekeeping entries before and after the edits, and the company handbook sections on bonuses and time reporting. Washington doesn't allow one-party secret recordings. I didn't have audio. What I had was better. System evidence. VirioStack's timekeeping platform logged who made edits. Not just adjusted to policy, but the user ID, the timestamp, and the IP range if you knew where to look. Most employees never did. I knew where to look because before I became an implementation coordinator, I'd done a year as an internal compliance assistant at a hospital network. I'd learned the hard way that systems always remember what people try to hide. I pulled the audit trail for my own time cards through the Employee Accessible Report menu. Buried, but there. Each week's overtime adjustment was tied to the same approver, Kell. Mason wasn't just benefiting from the edits. He was authorizing them. I stared at the pattern until my jaw ached. Then I wrote an email to myself from my personal account, summarizing what had happened with dates, hours, and amounts, attaching only my own records. I didn't dramatize. I didn't accuse. I documented. Over the next 2 weeks, Mason made good on his promise. I was put on a performance improvement plan, with goals that were mathematically impossible without the overtime he'd forbidden me to log. My access to certain client tools was restricted, so I couldn't hit the metrics. Lydia sat in the kickoff meeting and nodded as Mason described me as combative and uncoachable. Then, on April 4th, I was terminated for failure to meet expectations and insubordination. My insurance ended at midnight. When I got the COBRA quote, it was $1,112 or $80 a month. I paid it anyway, because Amir's insulin wasn't optional. Mason probably assumed that would break me, that once I was juggling COBRA and rent and a kid who needed constant monitoring, I'd fold. What Mason never understood was that desperation can make people reckless, but it can also make them precise. I filed a wage complaint with the Washington Department of Labor and Industries for unpaid overtime and misclassification. I filed for unemployment. And when a friend from my old compliance job asked quietly if I'd talked to anyone legal, I said the truth. I didn't have money for hourly rates. Then she gave me a name. Not a firm. A person. Nina Hallberg, a plaintiff-side wage attorney who took cases on contingency when the facts were clean. I met Nina in a small office near Pioneer Square. She didn't promise anything. She asked for my job duties, my records, and the audit trail. When she saw the Kell approvals, her face stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said. "This is willful. We filed a lawsuit for unpaid wages, retaliation, and willful withholding under Washington wage laws. Nina warned me Mason would try to bully. He would try to delay. He would try to make me spend money I didn't have. He did all of it. He hired a downtown defense firm with marble floors and a reception desk that looked like a bank. His attorney sent letters calling my claims baseless. They demanded mediation, then canceled. They requested extensions, then blamed my side for aggression. Every move was designed to exhaust me. Mason still told people I was a disgruntled employee. He still walked around VirioStack like his reputation was intact. Then the court date came, an early hearing on discovery sanctions, because Mason's team had failed to produce timekeeping audit logs despite repeated requests. That morning, I walked into King County Superior Court with my stomach tight and my spine straight. Amir was at school. My COBRA payment had cleared. My rent was due in 5 days. I'd worn a simple black blazer that made me feel like myself again, even if only for a morning. Mason was already there in the hallway, laughing with his lawyer like this was a networking event. He spotted me, and his smile widened. "No lawyer today?" His voice carried just enough for the people nearby to hear. "Or did you have to choose between counsel and insulin?" My throat tightened, but my face stayed calm. I didn't answer him in the hallway. I didn't give him the gift of a reaction. Inside the courtroom, Mason sat at the defense table with his attorney. I sat with Nina. Mason's eyes flicked to her briefly, irritation flashing. He hadn't expected contingency representation, but he still looked amused, like he believed money would win anyway. When the judge took the bench, the room settled into that formal quiet that makes everything sound louder. Papers rustling, chairs shifting, someone's nervous breath. Mason's attorney argued first, smooth and confident, claiming the audit logs were not reasonably accessible and that any missing data was inadvertent. The judge looked unimpressed. "Ms. Hallberg?" Nina rose and began, calm, factual, citing the discovery requests, the deadlines, the incomplete productions. The judge asked technical questions about the timekeeping system. Nina answered, then paused. "Your Honor, my client can address the system's audit function directly. She used it as an employee." Mason's mouth curved into a smirk, as if he couldn't wait for me to embarrass myself. The judge's gaze turned to me. "Ms. Watanabe, you may speak." I stood. My hands were steady on the edge of the table. I felt Mason watching me, waiting for me to sound like what he'd always wanted me to be. Uninformed, frantic, easy to dismiss. Instead, I opened my mouth and spoke in the cleanest, calmest sentence of my life. "Your Honor, the audit logs are accessible through the employee portal under timekeeping reports, and under Washington's wage statutes and court rules, the defendant's failure to preserve and produce those logs supports an adverse inference, especially because the edits were authorized under Mr. Kell's own user ID." The courtroom went still, not because I was loud, because the sentence landed like a pin through a balloon. The judge blinked once, then leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Watanabe, where did you learn to speak like that?" Before I could answer, Mason's attorney shifted, suddenly wary. Mason's smile faltered. The judge's eyes moved to my name on the pleadings, then back to me with a flicker of recognition that made my pulse jump. "Are you the Jenna Watanabe who serves on the Washington State Bar's Labor and Employment Section Advisory Committee?" Mason's head snapped toward me so fast it looked like it hurt. My voice stayed calm. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm a licensed attorney. I kept my bar status active while working to support my son." Mason's face drained of color in a slow, ugly wave. That was the moment he finally understood what he'd been mocking. He hadn't been taunting a powerless employee. He'd been taunting someone who could read his policies, his system logs, his emails, and his legal strategy like a second language. And I hadn't told him, because I didn't need his permission to be dangerous. The judge's expression tightened, not in anger, but in focus. "Mr. Kell," her voice turned toward Mason like a spotlight. "Did you authorize edits to this employee's time records?" Mason's lawyer started to speak, but the judge lifted a hand. "I asked Mr. Kell." Mason's mouth opened. Nothing came out on the first try. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Mason tried again, voice thinner now. I don't personally edit time cards." I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I simply slid the printed audit report Nina had marked as an exhibit across the table when the judge requested it. The judge read, her jaw set. "This shows approvals under Kell," she said, tapping the paper once. "Time-stamped, repeated, and there are gaps in the production that correlate with the weeks in question." Mason's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we object to—" The judge cut through him without raising her voice. "I'm ordering immediate production of the complete audit logs and issuing a preservation order. Any further failure will result in sanctions. Additionally, given the allegations of willful withholding and record manipulation, I'm referring this to the appropriate state agency for review." Mason's shoulders went rigid. In that single hearing, the power dynamic flipped so hard the air felt different. Mason wasn't the loudest person in the room anymore. He was just a defendant with a problem he couldn't laugh away. Afterward, in the hallway, Mason tried to recover his swagger, but it came out cracked. "So, you've been, what, playing poor?" I looked at him once, calm and direct. "I've been surviving. There's a difference." He didn't have a reply that didn't make him look worse. The next months were not cinematic. They were procedural, which is how real accountability actually happens. Discovery deadlines, depositions, a forensic review of timekeeping edits, L&I contacting former employees, quiet messages from people still at VarioStack who suddenly remembered their own time cards getting adjusted to policy. The investigation widened because once a system is proven capable of being abused, regulators don't just ask about one person. VarioStack settled before trial. The terms included back wages, double damages for willful withholding, attorney fees, and a written correction of my separation record. It also included something Mason had fought harder than money: an agreement to implement independent timekeeping oversight and reclassification review across the company. And Mason? He didn't get handcuffed on the courthouse steps. That's not usually how this ends. What happened was quieter, and in corporate life, quieter can be worse. The board hired an outside compliance firm. Investors asked questions they couldn't ignore. Mason was transitioned out in a carefully worded announcement about strategic leadership change. The defense firm stopped returning his calls. His name stopped opening doors. I didn't become rich. I became stable. I paid off the Cobra debt and moved Amir and me into a slightly larger place with a second bedroom that didn't smell like old carpet. I built a small emergency fund. I finally took Amir to the aquarium without calculating the ticket price like it was a moral decision. And I didn't go back to being quiet. I went back into labor and employment law, but not in the glossy tower way Mason imagined lawyers lived. I joined a nonprofit clinic in Seattle that helps hourly workers, caregivers, immigrants, single parents. If you love stories where the truth is revealed, you've found your channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications to make sure you're always up to date with life's biggest secrets and dramas. And now, I want to hear from you. What life lesson did you learn from this story? Share your reflection in the comments and use the hashtag #TruthRevealed, also telling us the city you watched this drama from.